So last minute, I'll do our quick intro for SCA, and then Kelly, I'll hand it over to you. It's Stein, right? Am I saying that right? Your last name? Okay, good.
Yes.
And I don't know if you guys can see it, but we definitely already have 132 people in our waiting room. So good luck to everyone. I'm very excited to hear what everyone has to say. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday, and welcome to the SCA Expo Weekend Lecture, Building Domestic Consumption, Learning from Successful Global Models. My name is Julie, and I'm with the Specialty Coffee Association, and I'll be your staff host for this lecture. You probably really won't see me too much. You'll see these other awesome faces in front of you. Before we start today, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to our title sponsor, Pacific Barista Series, for bringing you all of the Expo Weekend lectures. Thank you also to Savor Brands, Chemex, and Rostar for their support. And the lectures aren't the only thing we're doing this weekend. Right on your screen, you should be able to see the little flyer for the Barista Guild after party happening tomorrow on Sunday. And so please come back and join us for that. We'll have live music, a lot of fun chances to interact with everyone who's been attending all lectures and joining us virtually all weekend. So I hope you will join us for that. Before we get started as well, as the lecture unfolds today, just a quick reminder that if you have any questions for the presenters, as we progress, there is a Q&A tab. And so if you type your questions in there, we will get to some questions after the lecture. But now let's get things started. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Kelly Stein, who will be moderating today's lecture. Take it away, Kelly.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome, world. I hope everyone is safe and sound at home, enjoying a great cup of coffee. I am, and embracing all the online lectures of SCA, that is gracefully promoting and organizing while everyone is at home. For those who doesn't know me, my name is Kelly Stein. I'm an independent journalist and based in São Paulo, Brazil, and I write about coffee for Brazilian and international publications for more than 10 years. I also launched the first coffee-focused podcast in Brazil, and the first bilingual in the world is called Coffea, C-O-F-F-E-A. Sorry. Right before COVID-19, I launched Coffee Trips, which is like a tourism coffee company, and I offer coffee experiences in urban and rural areas. This is pretty different what we're living right now, and new, talking about coffee, learning and exchanging from our houses. I'm really excited and welcome you all in this format, the online panels, because it can reach more people at the same time, and it's cheaper, right, guys? So I'd like to say thank you all for being online here with us today. And it's an honor to talk to you, all coffee professionals. For this talk, I'm honored to share the screen with Very Spindola. She's a development economist and board director of CA. Right now, she's in Mexico City. And Adam McLean, the director of social enterprise of sustainable growers in Rwanda. Jean-Aimé, he's currently Director of Sustainable Growers Rwanda as well. He's doing very richful work implementing all the program activities. He's based in Kigali, Rwanda. He has more than 12 years working in the coffee sector and very close to the farmers. He joined Sustainable Growers in 2014 as a senior agronomist, and now he's 2 years promoting region manager position. So thank you all, Vera, Adam, and Jean-Aimé. For you who are in your houses very comfortably getting coffee education with us, we will organize this panel of 60 minutes in 3 main parts. First, can you go to the next, please? Yes, come back. So what we are going to do is why domestic consumption is important, especially when we are talking about crisis prices. We are going to do an overview, describe the panorama, and definitely we use quotes, list some cases of Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, and Rwanda as well. And between these conversations, we are going to say why price matters and why we should think about how to promote better price to our growers. Coffee price is not new. We are not faced the first one, neither the last one. And working with coffee farms, I'm from Brazil, close to me, I could witness the struggle of small and medium producers facing CMARC's prices drops. When I say small here in Brazil, small and medium, I mean 3 to 8 hectares. I also noticed a pattern that repeats generation after generation. And talking to Vera in Campinas, countryside of São Paulo State, at the World Coffee Producers Forum in 2019, we started talking about possible solutions to this crisis, things that we can even promote and make a reality faster. And considering we are both from producing countries, me from Brazil and her from Mexico, we started paying attention to our realities in our countries, in our backyards. So as a development economist, she started researching for inspiration solutions in domestic markets. Brazil, as the biggest consumption market in the world, according to the Euromonitor report, was obviously an important part of her research, which, by the way, will be available at SCA website, and you can wait for it. If you don't want to wait for it, I suggest you check her RICO presentation. She gathered great examples of how Colombia, Mexico, Rwanda, and Brazil producers are overcoming crisis selling to their domestic markets. So for this part, she will give a brief overview, and Jean-Aimé will also present their reality, and then we go and dive to the main topic. So thank you all. Welcome. And Vera, would you gift us with your knowledge? Your microphone is muted.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to invite back Julie in order to do something that we needed to do at the beginning of the webinar. Julie, do you want to mention the antitrust policy?
Sure. Just because of the nature of the topic, I won't turn my webcam on. You guys can just listen to my voice. I did want to make sure that we will run through the antitrust policy really quickly. It should be on your screen right now, but I'm going to read it out loud as well. So our antitrust policy for SCA online webinars is that the association is committed to full compliance with the letter and spirit of the European Union, United States, state, and other applicable antitrust and trade regulation laws. It is expected that all members, member company representatives, staff, and participants involved in SCA activities shall at all times avoid words and actions which may restrict or appear to restrict competition in our industry, including agreeing to set minimum, maximum, or fixed prices, competitors or potential competitors agreeing to allocate or divide markets, customers, territories, suppliers, or specific bids, and agreeing not to deal with any other party, boycotts. When discussions extend into an area of antitrust sensitivity, staff members in attendance shall request the discussion be immediately stopped, and if it does not, shall terminate the meeting. Any questions about this policy or a perceived violation can be directed to the email executivedirector@sca.coffee or via any of the contact methods on the sca.coffee webpage. And so, sorry for all the legal stuff, but we just wanted to make sure, just in case anything kind of came up. So now over to Vera.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that. You always say it so nicely. Thank you, Kelly, for that introduction, and thank you for moderating this lecture. First of all, I wanted to say a big thank you to Sustainable Growers, who actually invited me to be part of this lectures on domestic consumption, and we have been sharing some very interesting conversations among the team of Sustainable Growers and Sustainable Harvest. So the study that Kelly basically mentioned started in 2018, end of 2018, beginning of 2019, focusing a bit different than certain other studies out there regarding coffee consumption. Here, the focus much has been on consuming specialty coffee in producing countries and the effect on producers itself. So last year during RICA, when I presented the preliminary results, in the months after that followed, I continued studied cases in Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and I even had the opportunity to do interviews in Rwanda. And what I can share, and Kelly briefly mentioned it, is that after many writer blogs, the SCA and HEVOS will publish the study at the end of this month, so it will be then available for you guys. And we'll be also working on the Spanish translation of that project, of that study as well. One thing that I wanted to share a word with you here on the screen, and it's a word that has been accompanying me during this study. And this word value has, for me, been giving very different meanings in different elements, and I will try to take you on this journey with me, especially when it comes to value creation and how value is captured, and even at one point on how we actually put certain prices, translating value to a price tag on products has been a real different conversation when talking about local markets, especially when it comes to agriculture products. The value of that product is of essence when tackling this poverty reduction in these rural areas, especially as primary agriculture occurs in these rural areas. This also applies definitely to agriculture products that primarily is produced on local markets and export markets. In the case of coffee, we know that the majority of the coffee is being exported from those markets. So when we started with this study, it was basically when already a price crisis started, prices were falling, and putting producer countries again in this very vulnerable position. And although the prices have recovered a bit, and because we're in a different type of crisis, and next to also changes in the exchange rates, several producers are doing better in a certain sense, but we should definitely not forget that the causes of this price crisis have not fully been tackled or resolved even. So when we continue this discussion and talking about the different questions on what we can do, aside from certain intervention strategies in different parts of the sector, we also have to look at possible existing strategies. And we felt with the SCA and with HEVOS that domestic consumption needs further attention and further understanding. One of the famous images I've been using to also show on how the supply chain, current supply chain actually is the famous image of the coffee barometer report. And it shows you again how actually the disparity between value between the countries actually exists. So here we actually see value being captured by producing countries, and as I call it, traditional consuming countries. So it indicates that basically 10% of the 200 billion revenue generated in the coffee retail market is being captured by these producing countries. So that's quite so big of a difference. And if we say that also that the export market is perceived also as volatile, we should definitely take a closer look into and explore the local market as a valid opportunity for growth for these countries. So the study was focused, and as mentioned by Kelly, was focused on Brazil, Colombia, Rwanda, and Mexico, of course. And particularly when it comes to Rwanda, it was a bit of a specifically chosen for simply being not an evident coffee country. They are a tea drinking country, and coffee slowly picking up there. So it was very interesting to also see that type of country and looking into closer to it. Janame, could you share a bit more on how Rwanda is developing?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. As we are talking about the local domestic consumption of Rwanda, also as a producing country, we are facing this challenge of local consumption, where the local consumption is less than 3% of the production we have here in Rwanda. So sustainable growers is stepping in to play a big role to increase the domestic consumption through barista training, tourism, product development, and home roasting. Growers is a local NGO which was founded in 2013. In 2013, Bloomberg partnered with Sustainable Harvest Inc. to support the development of the Relationship Coffee Institute. And this is the home of sustainable growers and the Question Coffee. This Relationship Coffee Institute, it provides agriculture training to women farmers in Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo to increase the quality and the value of coffee in local and international markets. And the aim of all this was to lead towards economic independence for those women and their families. Since the start of this partnership, over 35,000 women farmers have been trained, and their coffee has been exported through Europe, Africa, and the United States. Thank you.
Let me unmute my. Yes, the first part is done. Thank you all to give this main panorama, but your study, Vera, took more than 1 year and you got some interesting numbers, right?
Thank you, Kelly. I think that when we started and when and how it progressed, it definitely caught our attention on how there were differences between the country, and then there were also so much similarities, and that for me was one of the very cool things to see. Right. One thing what we definitely can say from this study and what we have seen from the numbers is that coffee consumption in these producing countries, and I specifically focus now on Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, that coffee consumption has been growing. So from the figures collected in 2019, we could see that in Brazil, it's an estimate that around now 6.7 kilos per capita is being consumed. Colombia again has been growing in its number of consumptions. They're now up at 1.8 kilos per capita. And Mexico also increased and is now at 1.5 kilos per capita. And one of the important things here is also to mention is that these numbers are based on resources from the countries itself, and also companies, agencies doing estimates when it comes to these growth perspectives. In the case for Mexico, for example, your monitor expected to have a growth rate there from the last study in 2016 of 2% over the next 3 years, excuse me. And I think in that perspective, it goes to show that it's taking off more and more, and especially, of course, here Brazil is that example that a lot of the other producing country wants to head towards more consumption. Many of the other questions that people have also posed me, so what was the big reason or what was the big attribution to this growth? And there are several. For example, when it comes to Brazil and Colombia, the main reason for its increase of consumption has been attributed to their national programs that they have. Each of these countries have had different types of programs in place in the last decades or even more. And the elements really is more focused on the details of each country. So, for example, the famous school program in Brazil definitely has started this coffee consumption at a younger age than, for example, in other countries. In the case of Colombia, for example, its famous national program that started also picked up very much the coffee consumption in itself. But there's one also other particular factor within this is that we should not forget that also economic growth very much and stability very much help the sector to take off and start consuming more coffee. In the case for Brazil in its early 2000s, it definitely played an important role when it comes to more people drinking coffee. It's not only about people drinking coffee, but more people drinking coffee. And one of the other things that there was also similarity when having this opportunity to also visit these countries is that what we could see overall is that there is more coffee shops present within these countries, be it international coffee chains, be it local coffee chains, and be it just coffee shops of the countries itself. We could very much see that in the cities itself, but outside the metropolitan areas, there was a huge increase in coffee shops. And I particularly focus here on the element of the rise of specialty coffee shop, because it's an important one to note that in all of these three countries, and I could even say specific cases of Rwanda and specifically in Kigali, we could see more coffee shop than 3 to 4 to 5 years ago. And it is for that reason also for that we focused on specifically this segment, because we very much felt that there is more opportunity within the specialty coffee consumption section, where we could see more opportunity also for producer. And this also has to do with a study that came out in 2017 by Samper, Giovannucci, and Marquez, where it was indicated that more value was captured by producers when it comes to specialty coffee supply chains. Many of these cafes work directly with producers, and they work through, or can even work through specialty coffee intermediaries. So I try to also, state certain characteristics of producers who work with the specialty coffee shops, because I think it's important to understand who are part of these supply chains within these countries. So when it comes to producer, we often think that maybe the big producers, they're actually selling their coffee to these specialty coffee shops, but it could be small and it could even be medium. So what we saw is that specifically within the supply chain, we had different types of producers that maybe 20 to 30% they sold, especially on the local market, or even some were even selling almost until 80 to 90% on the local market. What I could also see is that a lot of the medium-sized producers were the ones that were also exporting their coffee. In some cases, when it comes to the small producers, they sometimes didn't know if their coffee was sold on the export market, but they did know specifically that when selling to a specialty coffee buyer in their own country, that they were selling on that local market, because that was what they've been told. When it comes to the profile a bit of the buyer of this specialty coffee, and particularly when it comes to Colombia and Mexico, it's parchment at the buy, and when it comes to Brazil, it's more in green. You could see again that these are small to medium entrepreneurs, very much relying on their own efforts to set up their business. It is often quite difficult, to say the least, to set up a business. They often rely on loans from families or their own savings, because simply it's this financial structures within these countries doesn't allow for having easy loans, or loans that are more accessible to them. And so these relationships have been developing for the last years. Again, they buy directly from the producer or through a specialty coffee intermediary that basically very much focuses on the quality aspects and that relationship that the buyer is looking for. So this is a bit of a panorama from what we have seen so far in the countries that are consuming specialty coffee and that consumption is rising. I want to also mention that that's very hard to find numbers on what percentage of that consumption was specialty coffee, simply because more research is necessary. I would definitely say that Brazil has a very good structure on how to actually measure that, because they have this specialty coffee characteristics when it comes to differentiating that in their own sector with the support of a big. It was good to have that number in. They estimated that it's around 12%, purely based on that certification scheme that they have. Very helpful. When it comes to Colombia and Mexico, it's based on estimation done by the institutions that are there present, and it was around 2.5 all the way to 5%. And that I refer to the percentage of what is being consumed within that country. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Vera. You mentioned Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico, and Adam may add his experience in Rwanda, right?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So we're going to talk on the Rwanda side right now about two elements. The first one being barista training. So in 2015, we started with a small espresso bar, and we were supplying coffee to one hotel, which was the newly opened Kigali Marriott Hotel. We found that the workforce training and barista training was the biggest challenge. The coffee harvest quality was very high. Roasting quality was easy to automate and keep at a high quality. But the quality of the finished beverage was really, really difficult for us to control. So we started with informal on-the-job training, and we ran a program for nearly 2 years where we saw some improvement, but not enough to for us to be satisfied. There was a lot of turnover in the industry. There was not much commitment from the private sector, which we think really was due to low incentives on both sides to invest in the training. We were battling against a bit of a status quo at the time as well. The status quo was low. The quality was low, and outlet operators didn't have a lot of those incentives to invest in rising above what the status quo of the industry was. So where baristas weren't seeing necessarily better opportunities with more training, the ones who were really trying to work to perfect their craft didn't have a market behind them to support what they wanted to do for higher quality. Moving from there, we decided to look at formal training. So in 2018, in partnership with SCA, Bloomberg and Bloomberg Philanthropies and MasterCard Foundation, we opened the first coffee training academy focused on brewing and barista education in Rwanda. So this is formal, internationally certified training through the SDA education program, and we use this to now incentivize both the baristas and the market to come on to better training. The coffee professionals were offered full scholarship for barista and brewing modules. Those who excelled in the foundation levels were invited to come back for intermediate. Those who excelled in intermediate were invited to attend professional. In the end, we had over 200 baristas enrolled, with 18 of them graduating as ASTs in both the barista and brewing modules. And so now we were able to develop a workforce that was very capable of delivering quality beverage into the cup, but then also to continue on the momentum by means of in-house trainers, company trainers, and then also ASTs for our own academy. So what kind of rise in consumption did we see around there? Well, the first thing was that after speaking with the trained baristas, their level of consumption at work went up quite a bit. They were much more eager, willing, and in a position where they could be drinking a lot more coffee at work, first and foremost. And I think that really helped us not only to drive up the quality, but also for the baristas and the coffee professionals and the hospitality professionals to really sell the coffee, be passionate about the coffee, to love the product. Over half of the graduates also reported higher coffee consumption amongst friends, where they'd like to go out for coffee, and at home. So, you know, and looking back, this makes a lot of sense that passionate, well-trained baristas are going to be eager to go out and explore the coffee ecosystem that they work in and the coffee environment that they work in. A little bit just on the workforce development as well. About a third of the graduates received promotions, putting them into supervisory or training roles within their organizations. And about half of the baristas who came to the school who were unemployed were able to find jobs. And so for us, that really shows that there's more of a domestic consumption economy happening there through hotels, restaurants, cafes that cater to both locals and to visitors. There were 54 companies enrolled in the training that share 79 outlets, and so we hope to follow a new status quo that shifts up to a higher quality as the market grows. So alongside the barista training, we also wanted to look at some tourism product development. There's tremendous growth in the Rwandan tourism industry. It's nearly 11% year over year. And Question Coffee wanted to position coffee in the growing tourism market, not just as a product that people drank, but something that people experienced as well. So we created two products to pilot. The first one was in culinary tourism, which means, you know, cooking, making stuff, tasting, and that's a coffee tasting masterclass. And the second product that was developed is in agritourism, which means visiting either farm, washing station, agricultural manufacturing, agro-processing. We piloted both of those products side by side, as the culinary tourism and agricultural tourism are very, very well connected to what we wanted to do in coffee. The products had two goals. The first one was to diversify the revenue streams for cooperatives and for our social enterprise, Question Coffee, through product innovation. And the second was to increase the market awareness for specialty coffee within the tourism market as a way to increase domestic consumption. Basically, the theory there is that if people are more aware of specialty coffee as they're visiting coffee-producing countries, they will spend more time while they're visiting looking out for new coffees to try. If somebody offers them coffee or tea or something else, they'll gravitate towards a product that they've heard about, that's somehow infamous, that has a bit of a reputation behind it. So it's all about the marketing there. Just a little bit about the tasting class. Pretty simple. We talk a little bit about the coffee history and supply chain, and then we give them a quick introduction on how to do cupping. We taste 6 coffees from Rwanda that all come from the graduates of the Sustainable Growers Program. And at the end of the course, the attendees get to make their own blend. We found that master class guests purchased 40% more roasted coffee than an average guest to our cafe. So you can see that giving them an experience, giving them that kind of a connection, gets them more excited about coffee consumption. If you think you know a little bit more about a product, you're likely to consume more of it. We did additional surveying and feedback forms, and we did find that guests who attended the class said they were more likely to look for coffee throughout their trip, and in a situation where they have a chance to try different coffees, they will recognize and look out for quality Rwandan coffee. Secondly, the masterclass itself has been replicated by several hotels operating in Rwanda that are using the baristas from the training program, and coffees coming from from the beneficiaries of the Sustainable Growers Program. So we really hope that we can continue to integrate with the different hotels and hospitality outlets so that more coffee experiences can be offered, because we do see a strong link between people attending coffee experiences and then buying more coffee. Secondly, the agritourism product, which is a farm and coffee washing station tour. On the slide, CWS stands for coffee washing station. You can see that it really goes through the majority of the value chain, from growing a seedling in a nursery, taking care of the trees, picking cherries, sorting, the fully washed coffee process, drying, milling, home roasting, and then finally cupping at the end. So this one has been really interesting for us. We've had a lot of chances to interact and work together with one cooperative that we're piloting this product with, which is Twongeri Umusaruro in the eastern province of Rwanda. It's created very valuable revenue streams, both for the tour operators as well as for the cooperatives themselves. And same thing that we found when we did surveys and feedback forms of the guests that visited the washing stations. After getting to know a little bit more about coffee, and the guests range from people who have never seen a coffee tree before to those who have been working in specialty coffee for years and years. There's a certain effect and an impact that people get personally from going on these tours, which then shifts their perception of specialty coffee as a consumer. And I think that they not only consume in maybe a more sophisticated way, but then they also understand the impact of their coffee consumption across the whole value chain. So those were two products that we brought forward, and we continue to develop them as both the tourism and hospitality industries increase and the local coffee economy increases as well. And I will pass it now on to Jean-Aimé, who will continue on about some of the roasting initiatives in the cooperative.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone. As I said before, also in Rwanda, as a producing country, we are facing the challenge of local consumption. But also, we saw that it's a part of the culture, of our culture. Since Rwandans started producing coffee, they didn't get any skills, or they didn't get involved in drinking coffee. It's a part of culture. That's why Sustainable Growers started creating the trainings. We call them home roasting. We call it home roasting because we want to start by the homes of our coffee farmers. We know that everything can start, everything, if you want any consumption of any product, if you start by home, it's there where people will learn about it and they start drinking it. Even those who can come to drink it to cafe, to question coffee or everywhere, they come to drink coffee because they learn that coffee is something which they can drink from their families. We started this training by training our women farmers. A woman, we are training the whole community, because if you're training a woman, you'll be training kids, you'll be training even their husbands. So we started this training to the local level with our beneficiaries, women farmers. And also we started them on how they can make a cup of coffee with the local machines, with all the local equipments. This is because used to know that coffee is a fancy drink. It's something you can drink with having the millions and millions. But we've shown to them that coffee can be made with the materials they already have at their homes. As you can see here, these are the equipment which are in every single household here in Rwanda. On the left, you can see that's a traditional pot made of clay. This is a mortar and pestle to grind coffee, and you see that in the right that they can get a fine coffee ready to drink using only these local materials. I think you can't see there any machine GSN for roasting or any for grinding, and these are local materials they are using to make a cup of coffee. And most of the people were curious, and they didn't know that they can make a cup of coffee from their home. Because coffee, there is a say here in Rwanda that they say, please take back your coffee. It's not said only for coffee, it's said for everything you take home and it's useless at your home level. Because we used to know that if you are not exporting coffee or if you are not selling it at the international market, there is no use at home. But we tried and we have shown them that coffee can be used at home. That was to challenge that say. Next slide. Yes. Since we started developing these trainings and showing farmers that they can make a cup of coffee, they were very happy and they started using coffee as a drink in ceremonies. A Norman said that, wow, this is my first time to taste coffee. And it was my 45th years growing coffee. I never tasted how it tastes. So since then, people started making coffee in their community, enjoying coffee at the cooperative level. Even when the cooperatives are having some ceremonies and they are having some guests, they are no longer buy any other drink for the guest and to provide to the guest. Now they use a cup of coffee and they can make a nice cup of coffee with the local equipment. Oh, this came next slide. Yeah, this became as a culture in their belief that it will be increased slowly because we started training farmers down there, and we believe even their kids now they started liking coffee because there are some cooperatives, as Adam mentioned, in the Eastern Province. TUK is now doing the coffee tourism. Recently, they started inviting some school kids to show them about coffee, to make them coffee lovers, and to tell them about the quality of coffee. So we are trying to create the coffee culture in young people. As you can see on the left photo, these are the young people enjoying their cup of coffee they have made from their home using the local equipment. So we are trying to create the culture in the community, the coffee culture, so that people can feel that they can make a nice cup of coffee, so that people can think to coffee as a drink before they think to any other kind of drink. On the right photo, you can see that is a lady. One of our beneficiaries was training her fellows about roasting. That lady is called Seraphine. Now she's gaining money from roasting coffee, from selling coffee in the local, in the community. She roasts, she grinds, and she packages, and she sells in the local community. Not only her, but we have them who started selling coffee, and they're selling it in the community. This shows that the community started loving coffee. The community is starting drinking coffee, and we believe that increasing local market will increase also the size of the market, so that our farmers can get where to sell their coffee. Thank you.
It takes a delay to unmute my mic. Sorry. Wow, so many insights and examples. Thank you very much, Vera, Adam, and Jean-Aimé. As I can see from your presentation, and for those who are watching this lecture, we would like to give some insights for their producing countries or buyers who wants to help producing countries. As I understand, everything starts with education, right? Education programs can inspire producers talking about their product and explaining why it's a little bit more expensive to final consumers and professionals as well. And maybe if they make a diversification of their products with products related to tourism, they can make extra money and at the same time engage the community. But this, and interrupt me if I'm not correct. All of this is important to have like a government incentive where they can help with loans to coffee shops, not only for growers, can help with initiatives like promoting coffee on TV, radio stations, and also promote and invest money in infrastructure, because lots of very poor countries, they don't have good roads, and this can make even more expensive the whole process. Here in Brazil, as my experience of Brazil, I can tell that in the past, Brazil invested, and even the government invested to promote coffee, local coffee, but in the past, they didn't focus in quality, they were focusing in quantity. And this program was there, even publicity, which was shown on TV. And this was right after, way after, before Toma Café program in Colombia. Actually, Toma Café was inspired by the Brazilian successful case. And I can see that this is an important role. With the specialty coffee community rising in the last, especially in the last 15 years, this kind of change a little bit. The consumer is more aware and demanding more quality. So the coffee industry is adapting to this demand. So they are launching special lines with better quality of coffee, and they charge a little bit more. And this is helping a lot. But with the coffee, specialty coffee scene, we can tell that some producers, smart producers, are even promoting their coffee. It's easier for them because they speak the language. They understand the logistics and all the taxes between one state and another. And they are promoting very well and telling their story very well. Even there are some that are coffee celebrities, where in coffee events, people were taking pictures with them and buying directly from their hands. With all this, would like Vera, Adam, Janem give some final advices, or especially for very poor countries?
I definitely, there's one thing that I think it's important to mention here when it comes to consuming specialty coffee in these countries. And it's the closer look that I took when it comes to internal market prices for these producers. So what I did is I basically took a closer look into these internal market prices for specialty and for conventional, and at the same time looking at the FOB prices at that moment in time. So the data that I collected was from the period from February to July 2019. And what I did is that I looked at the internal conventional market prices. In the case of Brazil and Colombia, I used the resources of CONAP and FNC, which reflect the national average. So I took them over this specific period. And when it comes to the case of Mexico, we don't have an internal market price regulation as Brazil and Colombia. So the number that is reflected when what I will be showing reflects the average of the data provided by the producers that I interviewed. And for all three countries, the internal prices for specialty coffee all come from the interviews that I held in these countries. By no means reflect the national average. It's just an example of the state case studies that I took into consideration. Unfortunately, for the case of Rwanda, there were not sufficient information or data gathered, and it's definitely a topic that we want to continue looking forward. And then briefly, I will mention that for the case of the specialty, for the FOB prices, I used the specialty coffee transaction guide as a reference to these FOB prices because they have gathered over the course of 3 years now a good amount of data in order to do so. So I will start with Colombia. And in the case for Colombia, Colombia and Mexico, they often sell in parchment. So I did want to reflect that particular internal market price towards that being in parchment. So please note that for the internal conventional market price and specialty coffee market price, we see here actually the price in parchment. So over the period of February and July of last year, the internal conventional market prices was 0.82 cents per pound. And when it comes to the international specialty market price that I collected, I found it was at 1.86 cents per pound. At the same time, we could see here that the FOB price was around 1.66. Now I will show Mexico. The case of Mexico, the international, there's a typo there, but it's the internal conventional market price is 1.80. And when it comes to the internal specialty market price is 2.55. So the difference is quite significant. When it comes for the FOB price and looking at the specialty coffee transaction guide, at the same around the period is 1.79. So in both cases, we could see that the domestic market, when it comes to specialty coffee, it's more profitable for producers with specialty coffee. And were interesting conversations because the prices defined during these transactions of specialty coffee are based on quality volume consideration without really considering international market prices. And this is based from the conversations that I had with these specialty coffee buyers. Now, in the case of Brazil, the internal convention market prices was 0.93 cents per pound, and the internal specialty market price is 0.56. When it comes to the FOB price around that time is 1.49. And although the difference is here smaller than the other two countries, we could also see that the specialty markets for the internal market is very much of relevance for these producers. And I think even in the case of Brazil, you could see that everything is there reflected in green. The Brazilian producers very much are aware that because of the rise of generally consumption in their country and that consumers drink a lot of coffee, they have seen that specific demand for specialty coffee. Of course, again, this reflects case studies in itself, and at the other hand, it is still a niche segment. So some would say, how big can that get? But I think overall, these producers, when you see the sector, when you see these producers being motivated because they're able to fetch good prices on these domestic markets, and they although there are downsides to it, so as well as upsides to it, they do see that as a valid strategy for themselves in the last years. And most of all, they have found within their own countries a large potential consumer group that is willing to pay for this. So in general, they all feel that it's one of the strategies they want to go into more deeper in that sense. And having said that, I think overall, from my perspective, there can be a downside to being this a niche market in terms of value. But definitely when you see it in terms of value, it's a huge opportunity for these producers to go into these domestic markets in a sense. And although some would say maybe there would be at one point a certain market saturation, when we looked at it, even at the beginning of the year, there was all signs of this growing forward. Of course, this contingency has created a different panorama, but that doesn't really change the fact that these producers are fetching a really good price on their domestic markets. And it does show more, even more so, the elements that we need to focus on in order to support these small and medium entrepreneurs in these countries, specifically also when it comes not only from a producer angle, but also from the business angle from these coffee shops. Still, there are not that many credit schemes options for them open. Especially in these types of situations as we're in right now, there's a lot of need of savings, of support mechanisms that helps them continue during this contingency. I see that we have just 5 minutes, but I just wanted to end this with the following. I think especially coffee especially coffee consumption in producing countries is a strategy that we all can support, and is one that very much benefits the producers in a sense. I think when I started this conversation with several people of the industry, I knew that there was more behind it than the eye would first see. And now I definitely try to, share as much as possible the message that we need to continue also consuming local, and not because it's local and it's here. It's also because we're seeing now with numbers that producers are paid very good when we're talking about specifically these specialty coffee supply chains in our countries. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Wow, we are almost 1 hour already talking about coffee. Thank you all for being this whole hour with us. We have some spare minutes to read some questions, and we have very interesting ones. And I'd like to start with the question of Andrew Hetzel for Adam. What unexpected challenge did you encounter when launching the barista training field tour program? Knowing what you do know now, what would you approach differently?
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. I think when we launched the field tours, we were very much thinking about the coffee industry. We were thinking about developing the right products which suited our social enterprise efforts, and then also the efforts of the cooperative. And we didn't focus enough on how new tourism products fit into the sales mix of tourism in East Africa. And so there were a couple of nuances there that definitely made it difficult for us to get early traction in the sales, with the existing tourism infrastructure. So I would say one thing that we definitely would have done differently was to look through both sides of that value chain. We spent too much time focusing on just the cooperatives and ourselves, really, and needed to spend more time with who were going to be our future resellers and the people reaching out to our customers. It took us a little bit of time after we developed the product to then retool the way that it was sold and marketed, so that it really did fit with the right customer base. So it's very important to look at both sides of those when you're venturing into the tourism industry.
Very good. So we have Bruna Jatoba Vieira. She's asking for anyone who wants to answer. The increase of coffee consumption this panel is talking about, is it only about specialty coffee or traditional one too?
So it's both. So I took from a first angle, is coffee consumption growing in these countries? And then, the resources in all of the countries showed that coffee consumption is growing. Then I specifically looked into specialty coffee consumption. In the case for Brazil, it was easier to see that curve growing as well. And also there's just a general response from everybody saying there are more coffee shops, and there also are more specialty coffee shops. And I think for when it comes to getting data on how many are specialty coffee shops, that is specifically more research, more study is specific needed to capture that definition of coffee focus shops being a coffee shop, just like a general, not so much focus on the coffee as a product in itself, right?
You're just adding your answer. Here in Brazil, with my experience, São Paulo state has lots of specialty coffee shops. Belo Horizonte, Curitiba, Rio, even if it's a touristic place, not much. And Brasilia too. Next question from Kate McDonald. Have you seen an increase in local consumption in response to the price crisis? For anyone who wants to answer.
I can say that here in Mexico, it has been very tough for the small and medium entrepreneurs when it comes to local consumption of coffee shops. Many promote of course, their home delivery and the websites that they have where you can order your coffees on. It's working. From what I've understood, it goes up and down. I mean, people start to focus more on consuming locally as such. So there is a bit more consciousness regarding that aspect. It's not measured yet, so it's more of a hearsay from a hearsay source.
Great. The next question is from Laura V. Flores, and this one is for you, Janem. Hi, great talk. Regards from Colombia. I have a question for Janem. And what extent do you think that the strategy of motivating producers to consume their own coffee has contributed to strengthening their sense of belonging to what they do?
This strategy of teaching farmers to drink or to test it on their products, first of all, it encourages them to work hard to produce coffee, because since they started testing their coffee, they have now known the how to bargain, even how to bargain with buyers. Example of, like, let me say an example of two cooperatives. We have started with one is in Tijuca and the other one is in Yaminga. Now they have their cupping lab at their coffee washing station. As they started consuming coffee, now they can cup their product and know what is the score of their product, and this helped them even to bargain with buyers, telling them we have this cup, you have this coffee, and he scored this cupping score. So this encouraged them to continue working in coffee, and also as we are increasing this local consumption and we have this Question Coffee, and Question Coffee is buying coffees from farmers, from local farmers, at the same price, even when there is a price crisis, pay price. So this it brought it awakened even the coffee farmers to see that coffee is valued, and the coffee can bring something in the community.
Thank you. The next one is for anyone who wants to answer. Pedro Gonzalez is asking, COVID-19 will affect domestic consumption. What would be the magnitude and what to do about it?
I see Julie popping up. I just briefly want to say that is why it's a great question. I think that is why it's important to measure consumption data, specifically when it comes to in our own countries, because it allows us to monitor those types of changes. The impact, yes, will be very hard, especially because these small and medium entrepreneurs are closed and in a way are not serving as they normally serve. What the impact will be, very hard to say at the moment. Each country is different. Their contingency plan is different. So yeah, I can leave it at that because Julie is time tracking.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. We have some more minutes for questions. We have very interesting questions.
Jean or May, you guys want to get in on the last question? Answer, rather?
Yeah, it's just a comment on the local consumption. I mean, say the challenge we met when we are teaching this when we are trying to increase this local consumption. There are some sayings or some myths taught on coffee. Like if we are training Rwandans to drink coffee, some of them are mistaken about coffee. They say, hey, when you drink coffee, you get heart attack. Hey, when you drink coffee, you can't sleep. hey, when you drink coffee, this and this. So I see that there is a need for some medical findings or like some showing the benefits of coffee to our health, so that we can use them even when advertising this coffee farmers or when we encouraging these coffee people to drink coffee, especially in East Africa. I know that there are these sayings, these bad sayings on coffee. So we need some proofs, medical proofs, showing the benefits of drinking coffee, so that everyone can be encouraged to take a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. We are running out of time, unfortunately. We have several questions here that I can see, but we won't have time to answer all of them. So I'd like to invite you all to keep this conversation via email. So you can see in the last slide our emails, or via SCA communication channels. Thanks everyone for your time and for your insights. And I hope seeing you guys very soon with a cup of coffee when this quarantine is over.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Vera.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
That concludes